For as long as anybody could remember, Phyllis Summers had been known for her passion, whether it was in love, business, or commitment to people who were important to her. Her dogged determination and fearlessness had garnered her admirers as well as adversaries in Genoa City. On the other hand, Christine Williams established a reputation that was distinct from mine. Christine was regarded as a pillar of reason and fairness due to her level-headedness, her commitment to justice, and her adherence to a rigid moral compass. These characteristics, on the other hand, frequently came into conflict with Phyllis's tendency to act on impulse and her need to take control of the situation. After discovering that they were on opposing sides of a contentious topic, none of the two women was willing to back down from their position. With this particular instance, the tension was not merely rekindled by a personal rivalry. Rather, it was an issue of great consequence that had the potential to alter Genoa City indefinitely. At the heart of the controversy was the possibility of a relationship between Newman Enterprises and Trident Dynamics, a tech company that has been associated with controversy. Christine and Phyllis found themselves emotionally invested in the success of the project as the corporation began to set out its plans for a new, ambitious initiative that aimed to bring modern surveillance technology to the city. In her capacity as the district attorney for Genoa City, Christine had her sights set on putting a stop to the transaction. Given Trident Dynamics' long history of violating individuals' privacy and engaging in questionable business practices, she was extremely concerned about the company. On the other hand, Phyllis was intrigued with the concept of bringing innovation and advancement to Genoa City. She believed that this might permanently establish the city as a pioneer in the fields of technology and security. Her perspective was that Trident Dynamics was a formidable ally that would bring in new business, employment prospects, and opportunities for all parties concerned. During the time that they were meeting in the Crimson Lights Cafe for what would ultimately become a heated argument, both of the women could feel the tension between them growing. Phyllis leaned forward and added, "Christine, you are exaggerating this situation to an extreme degree." Her eyes flashed with resolve as she spoke. It is not true that Trident Dynamics is a malicious organization. They are a corporation that has the ability to revolutionize this city and bring it into the future. Without a single tremor, Christine raised her eyebrow. The company in question has a well-documented history of engaging in unethical business practices. Despite the fact that you believe this is only about business, it is actually about safeguarding the citizens of Genoa City. Phyllis expressed her frustration by saying, "Oh, don't act so high and mighty, Christine. There are some things that are not black and white, and there are times when progress requires a little bit of risk." In reality, the argument that took place at Crimson Lights was just the beginning. The quarrel between Christine and Phyllis became more heated over the course of the subsequent few days. Every time they came into contact with one another, the topic of discussion invariably circled back around to Trident Dynamics, and neither of them was willing to agree to a compromise. It did not take long for the rest of Genoa City to become aware of the growing conflict between the two women, and at that point, speculation began to run rampant. There was more to the conflict than just Phyllis's corporate interests at stake. Her goal was to demonstrate that she was a visionary, someone who was not afraid to take chances for the sake of advancement. She was determined to accomplish this. Christine's resistance was seen by her as yet another attempt to undermine her, a personal vendetta that had nothing to do with the city's well-being. She believed that Christine's goal was to undermine her. Christine, on the other hand, was unable to ignore the history of Trident Dynamics. She had gone through studies that brought to light the problematic activities of the organization, which included information breaches and the inappropriate use of surveillance equipment. This fight was about ethics and integrity for her, and she believed that Phyllis was being willfully oblivious to the possible hazards that could arise throughout the conflict. The flames that were already present between them were stoked by their history, which was riddled with years of personal competition and misunderstandings. Both of the women were plagued by recollections of prior betrayals, and none of them was able to free themselves from the resentment they had harbored for such a long time. It was not merely Trident Dynamics that was the source of their anger toward one another. Rather, it was unresolved issues that had been building up for years of tension. One evening, as Christine was leaving the courthouse, Phyllis approached her with the intention of making another attempt to persuade her to see things from her point of view. Phyllis began by folding her arms in a belligerent manner and saying, "Christine, I get it. You don't like me, and maybe you never will. The issue at hand is not about us. Now is the time to act in a manner that is beneficial to the city." Christine appeared to be looking at her with a steady and unmoving stare. "It is not necessary for me to like you in order to recognize that you are making a mistake, Phyllis. Because of your ambition, you are allowing your judgment to be clouded." The expression on Phyllis's face became more stern. "And you are allowing your obstinacy to prevent Genoa City from achieving its goals." The conflict between Phyllis and Christine quickly caused Genoa City to become split. Phyllis's partner, Nick Newman, who was on again, off again with her, found himself split between encouraging her zeal for invention and his own reservations about the hazards involved. A stunning turn of events occurred when Sharon, who had a history of disagreements with Phyllis, agreed with Christine and stated that Trident Dynamics constituted a threat to the inhabitants of Genoa City in terms of both their privacy and their safety. Victor Newman, who is not one to shy away from controversy, found himself captivated by the possibilities of Trident Dynamics. He saw it as an opportunity to increase Newman Enterprises' influence, and he recognized that this was an opportunity. Although he made sure to keep his involvement under wraps, he simply supported Phyllis's efforts and pushed her to move forward with her plans. Concurrently, Jack Abbott was experiencing a disagreement. Both ladies were familiar to him for a considerable amount of time, and he had problematic connections with both of them. The energy and ambition that Phyllis possessed was something that he recognized, but he also admired Christine's integrity. He was torn, and he cautioned Phyllis to proceed with caution. Nonetheless, he knew better than to attempt to dissuade her from engaging in a fight. Christine did the same thing that Phyllis did, which was to recruit allies and put forward her goal. She filed a petition with the municipal council, gathering proof of the violations that Trident Dynamics had committed in the past. Through the organization of meetings with concerned residents, she was able to garner support from individuals who shared her concerns on the possibility for abuse by the company. The city experienced the beginnings of the rift. Friendships became strained as individuals chose sides, each of them believing that they were fighting for the future of Genoa City they were supporting. In the meantime, Phyllis and Christine were more firmly established in their respective roles, and they both became more motivated than ever before to emerge victorious. When Phyllis, with Victor and several other prominent business figures in support, staged a press conference to announce a preliminary agreement with Trident Dynamics, the conflict reached a point where it was very close to boiling over. While she was standing in front of the cameras, she presented a picture of Genoa City that was brighter and safer to live in, one in which innovation and security went hand in hand. She spoke with such passion that she promised the development of jobs and the promotion of technology that would be to the benefit of the entire community. While Phyllis was giving her address, Christine remained in her office and watched the announcement. She tightened her jaw as she listened to her. The carefully crafted words and assurances sounded alluring, but she was well aware that they were a mask for the actual dangers. She was unable to merely stand by and let this transaction take place without raising any objections. Christine made a courageous action by interrupting the press conference and coming at the event with documents that detailed the questionable activities of Trident Dynamics. As she approached the podium, she turned around to confront Phyllis with a gaze that conveyed her complete and utter determination. Christine's voice was calm but authoritative as she stated, "Let's not forget who we're dealing with before we all get swept up in promises of progress and security, so that we don't forget who we're dealing with. There is a long history of privacy and ethical violations committed by Trident Dynamics. As a result of their actions, communities have been betrayed and promises have been broken. In Genoa City, we just do not have the financial means to take such risk." There was a murmur among the gathering, which was taken aback by the unexpected presence of Christine. The expression on Phyllis's face hardened as she confronted her lifelong foe, demonstrating that she would not be intimidated. "Christine," Phyllis responded, her tone oozing with controlled disregard. "It's easy to stand there and criticize, but real change requires courage and vision." Phyllis's tone was dripping with controlled disdain. It is only fair that Genoa City be given the opportunity to develop, and Trident Dynamics is able to provide that opportunity. It was impossible to overlook the fact that their conflicting values were now in the public eye, and the tension that existed between them was evident. Both of the women refused to give in as they presented their arguments in front of reporters. After the press presentation, Genoa City was filled with people who had varying perspectives about the matter. Phyllis's image of a future driven by innovation was able to influence some individuals, while others disagreed with Christine because they were concerned about the potential dangers and ethical repercussions. Both Christine and Phyllis maintained their efforts, with each of them becoming more determined to emerge victorious. While Christine stepped up her legal efforts to thwart the transaction, Phyllis worked to garner the backing of key business leaders through lobbying. They engaged in a conflict that spread to every nook and cranny of the city, with friends, family, and co-workers taking opposing approaches. During quiet moments, both women experienced the damage that their quarrel had caused. Christine was struggling with the weight of the responsibility of standing against something that many people saw to be progress, while Phyllis, who was often full of self-assurance, found herself questioning whether or not she was doing the right thing. Christine's presentation against Trident Dynamics, in which she cited potential concerns to civil rights and security, brought the tensions to a new high point during a meeting of the council. Phyllis rebutted the argument by providing proof of the potential advantages that the transaction could bring, portraying a picture of economic expansion and advancement. There was no obvious settlement in sight, and the council was left in a state of division. They were both fatigued from their battle, yet they were still hesitant to compromise despite the fact that the impasse weighed hard on both of them. Phyllis had a rare period of contemplation, and during that time she started to question whether there was a way to meet Christine's concerns without giving up on her vision. Christine was contacted by her, and she proposed that they meet in private to discuss the possibility of reaching a compromise. Christine gave her consent, despite her reluctance, because she was aware that their standoff was causing the city to fall apart. The talk between the two women was tense but honest, and it took place over coffee. Christine expressed her concerns regarding privacy and security, and Phyllis listened attentively while she did so. For the very first time, Phyllis admitted that Christine's worries were legitimate. Christine, in turn, took into consideration the potential advantages that could be gained from Trident Dynamics. She acknowledged that the corporation had the ability to deliver chances to Genoa City, provided that they were kept accountable. Following several hours of discussion, they came to a provisional agreement, which stated that Trident Dynamics would be subject to stringent oversight, and that there would be safeguards in place to protect the privacy and safety of government employees. In the event that these conditions were met, Christine would be willing to support the arrangement. However, despite the fact that neither of the women found it simple to make a compromise, they both realized that it was essential. Stability was essential for the city, and their mutual dedication to Genoa City's future was more important than their personal hostility for one another. Although the deal with Trident Dynamics was finalized, Christine requested that certain precautions be included in the agreement. The city of Genoa started to reap the rewards, which included the creation of new jobs and an increase in revenue coming into the city. Christine's influence guaranteed that Phyllis's vision of development was realized, but that it was tempered by care and responsibility. Phyllis's vision included progress. At the same time as Phyllis and Christine continued to compete with one another, they also developed a mutual respect for one another. They had a violent disagreement, but in the end, they were able to find a point of agreement, which demonstrated that despite their differences, they both had a strong concern for the future of Genoa City with great concern. Phyllis and Christine both became more powerful as a result of the conflict they had fought and the conclusion they had achieved. This occurred concurrently with the progression of the city. The reverberations of their disagreement continued to reverberate, but so did the realization that they were capable of achieving more jointly than they could alone. Nikki Newman had spent more time than she cared to admit watching the people she loved struggle with addiction. Her own battles, public and painful, had left scars. Over the years, she'd become not only resilient but deeply attuned to the signs of a silent battle. This time, her intuition led her to Jack Abbott, her longtime friend and occasional confidant. They had supported each other in more ways than one, through business rivalries, heartaches, and even shared recovery milestones. It was at a recent charity event when she first noticed something was off. Jack was charming and present, but a subtle restlessness shadowed his movements. He smiled and mingled, but Nikki could see through the facade. She had seen those mannerisms before, the telltale signs of a man at war with his own demons. The longer she observed, the more certain she became that Jack was slipping. The idea troubled her deeply, and she knew she had to act before it was too late. After the event, Nikki pulled him aside. "Jack," she said, a concerned but soft edge to her voice. "I don't mean to pry, but are you okay?" Jack's smile faltered, just for a moment. He placed a hand on her shoulder, brushing off her concern. "Nikki, I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine. Just a bit tired, that's all." But Nikki didn't believe it for a second. Despite Jack's reassurances, Nikki couldn't shake her worries. She knew Jack well enough to understand that he was the last person to admit weakness. Determined to get to the bottom of it, she reached out to others close to him, subtly probing for information. Phyllis, his on-again, off-again partner, confirmed that Jack had seemed distant lately, often pulling late nights at the office or keeping to himself. This only heightened Nikki's concerns. Jack had confided in her during previous struggles, especially when the weight of his family responsibilities and business pressures had led him to the bottle in the past. He'd been sober for years, and Nikki wanted to believe he was strong enough to resist, but the signs were there. As she sat at her office at Newman Enterprises, she realized that her next move had to be a more direct one. She decided to visit Jack at J-Bot, hoping to catch him off guard and gauge his state for herself. She needed to see, up close, if her instincts were right. When Nikki arrived at J-Bot, she found Jack in his office, buried in paperwork. He looked up, a bit surprised to see her there, but quickly masked his surprise with a smile. "Nikki, to what do I owe this pleasure?" Jack greeted her, his voice warm but guarded. She didn't waste any time on pleasantries. "Jack, I'm worried about you," she said, her voice firm yet gentle. "I know what it looks like when someone is struggling, and I think you need help." Jack's face hardened. "Nikki, I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly fine. There's a lot going on at J-Bot right now, but that's nothing I can't handle." Nikki took a step closer, meeting his gaze. "Jack, I've been where you are. I know that pressure, that weight. If you're going through something, there's no shame in admitting it." Jack looked away, his jaw clenched. "I'm not the one who needs help here, Nikki." The comment stung, but Nikki pressed on, refusing to be deterred. "Jack, don't push me away. We've been through too much for that. Just talk to me. You don't have to do this alone." Jack's defenses wavered, and for a brief moment, he looked vulnerable, but he quickly regained his composure. "Nikki, thank you, but I'm fine. Really." Nikki left J-Bot feeling more frustrated and worried than ever. She knew Jack was hiding something, and she wasn't about to give up on him. As days passed, Nikki found herself reflecting on her own battles with addiction. Memories of her lowest moments surfaced, a stark reminder of the power that substance abuse held over one's life. She remembered the fear, the loneliness, and the feeling that no one understood her pain. Determined to reach Jack, she decided to share her story with him, hoping it would break through his defenses. She invited him to the Newman Ranch, where they could talk in private, away from the prying eyes of the office and the pressures of their daily lives. Over a cup of coffee, Nikki began to recount her experiences, the times she felt she had no control over her addiction, and the support she had leaned on to find her way back. "Jack," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "you don't have to carry this burden alone. I know what it's like to feel like you're losing control, but trust me, it doesn't make you weak to ask for help." Jack listened, his expression unreadable. He remained silent, but Nikki could sense that her words had touched him. She hoped that, in time, he would open up and let her in. When Jack still didn't reach out, Nikki knew she needed backup. She reached out to Ashley, Jack's sister, who was equally concerned but hadn't yet confronted him directly. Together, they devised a plan to stage a subtle intervention, hoping to make Jack see the truth without pushing him too hard. They invited Jack to a dinner at the ranch under the pretense of a casual get-together. During the evening, Nikki and Ashley steered the conversation toward their shared struggles and triumphs, creating an environment where Jack might feel safe enough to share his own burdens. Jack, however, remained guarded, his walls firmly in place. Despite their best efforts, he resisted their attempts to help, insisting that he had everything under control. As the weeks went on, Jack's behavior grew more erratic. He became increasingly isolated, throwing himself into his work to avoid facing his problems. Nikki watched helplessly, feeling more desperate with each passing day. Finally, an incident forced Jack to confront the truth. He showed up at a meeting visibly impaired, his speech slurred and his focus scattered. Nikki, who had attended the meeting, was horrified, realizing just how deep Jack's struggles had become. After the meeting, she confronted him in private, her voice laced with both anger and compassion. "Jack, this has to stop. You're only going to hurt yourself and the people who care about you." For the first time, Jack's defenses crumbled. He slumped into a chair, his face buried in his hands. "I don't know how to stop, Nikki. I thought I had control." But Nikki placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We'll get through this, Jack, together." With Nikki's support, Jack began the difficult journey of recovery. She stood by him every step of the way, offering him the same compassion and understanding that others had shown her during her darkest days. Through counseling and support groups, Jack slowly began to regain his strength, learning to face his demons rather than running from them. Nikki was a constant presence, reminding him that he wasn't alone, that he had people who loved and supported him. Their bond grew stronger, forged by shared struggles and mutual understanding. In helping Jack, Nikki found a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder of her own resilience and the importance of helping others find their way back. Months later, Jack stood before his friends and family, a stronger, more grounded man. His journey was far from over, but he had taken the first steps toward reclaiming his life, with Nikki by his side every step of the way. As they stood together, watching the sun set over the ranch, Jack turned to Nikki with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Nikki. I don't know if I could have done this without you." Nikki smiled, her heart filled with pride. "We're all stronger together, Jack. Don't ever forget that." And with that, they faced the future, hopeful and determined to keep moving forward, together. At Newman Enterprises, where Victor Newman, the steadfast titan of Geno City, was sitting in his office, there was a touch of something that was not normally introspective in his look. On the one hand, the empire that he had constructed from the ground up was operating without any problems. But on the other hand, he had been hearing rumors of unrest within the ranks. When it came to Newman Enterprises, Victor had been able to keep his iron grip on the company for many years, using his family members like if they were pieces on a chessboard. However, recent changes in the company, as well as among his own children, had resulted in an undercurrent of stress that he could no longer ignore. Victor's thoughts wandered to his family, whose loyalty was always in question, and the connections that existed within Newman Enterprises were more precarious than they had ever been. There had been an increase in the number of disagreements between Adam, Victoria, and Nick, all of whom had their own goals and objectives, which put the stability of the company in peril. Even though Victor enjoyed a healthy dose of family competition, he was aware that the rifts were growing deeper. Additionally, he was aware that an external danger was on the horizon in the form of a foreign investor who was reported to have his sights set on Newman Enterprises. At precisely the moment when Victor was contemplating his next step, his phone buzzed and an unexpected name appeared on the screen. Tucker McCall. Victor was filled with a sense of both curiosity and mistrust. Tucker McCall was a wild card, a cutthroat businessman whose goals frequently brought him into direct collision with Geno City's power people. He was constantly in dispute with them. Despite the fact that Victor could not deny that Tucker's resourcefulness and cunning had piqued his interest over the years, the two of them had never been on friendly terms regarding their relationship. Tucker was a thorn in the side of the Newmans, and there had been times when they had formed partnerships, but those relationships were, at best, uncomfortable. His response was Victor Newman, and his voice was unmoved throughout. It was clear that Tucker's tone was calm and collected as he addressed Victor. "I believe that it is about time that we had a conversation. I have a proposition that I believe you will have a strong interest in." One of Victor's eyebrows was lifted, and the question is, "Tucker, what kind of a proposal would that be?" There was a trace of amusement in Tucker's tone of speech, the one that could be to our mutual advantage. "As you can see, I believe that we share a common interest in safeguarding Newman Enterprises against dangers that originate from the outside. You are aware of the investor who is based in Singapore, right?" One of Victor's eyes narrowed. "Without a doubt. Dear McCall, I beg you not to tell me that you have suddenly become concerned about Newman's health. I had not worried. I am, without a doubt, interested in protecting my own assets. For the sake of argument, let's pretend I have a motive to prevent certain entities from interfering with the affairs of Geno City. Victor, Newman Enterprises has a greater influence than meets the eye. And if someone were to destabilize it, it would have the potential to kick off a chain reaction." Victor decided to take a seat and reflect on what Tucker had said. Even if there was no love lost between them, Tucker had made a point that was worth considering. There is a possibility that a foreign company with unclear motivations could in fact cause turmoil, not only for Newman Enterprises, but for the entire economic landscape of Geno City for that matter. In response, Victor said, "Fine, I'll look at it. However, I want to make one thing perfectly clear to you, Tucker. I do not trust you." "There is no need for trust," Tucker stated in a seamless manner. "Just a confluence of interests. Regarding the specifics, I will get back to you." Victor's thoughts began to race with the various possibilities as the call came to an end. This relationship was entirely unanticipated and filled with danger, but it could have been just the kind of innovative tactic that he required at that moment. A few of days later, Victor found himself in a private conference room with Tucker McCall. They were both there to meet face to face. Due to the fact that they had been competing for years, the atmosphere between them was heated. Both of the guys were accustomed to being in the driver's seat, and neither of them was interested in taking on the role of the subordinate. "Victor," Tucker said as he nodded his head in greeting, "I want to express my gratitude for our meeting. We are not always in agreement with one another." The response that Victor gave was, "Get to the point, Tucker. In this situation, what are your true goals?" The expression on Tucker's face was unreadable as he leaned back. A conglomerate that is situated in Singapore and is led by a certain business magnate named Richard Lang is ready to make an attempt to acquire Newman Enterprises with the intention of acquiring the company. According to Lang, his reputation is not even close to being ethical, and if he manages to get his foot in the door, he will use Newman as a pawn to push his influence into the market in Geno City. Victor wore a frown. "Are you planning to put a stop to him?" Calculation could be seen glittering in Tucker's eyes. "Let's just say that Lang and I have known each other in the past. Even when measured against our standards, his actions are callous. From the moment he begins, he will not stop until he has dismantled everything that you have constructed, one brick at a time." Victor was not in need of being persuaded. He had a familiarity with the Lang family and its standing in international markets. They had a notorious reputation for conducting hostile takeovers, which consisted of removing the value of firms before selling them off in chunks. "What is it that you believe?" The tone of Victor's question was reserved. Tucker's response was calm and composed. "A two-pronged defense. I am in charge of the financial countermeasures that are utilized to slow down Lang's advancement, and I make use of a few of my worldwide relationships in order to introduce obstacles. In the meantime, you are working to garner support within Newman Enterprises and dominate the internal factions in order to prevent Lang from taking advantage of any weaknesses. By working together, we generate a sufficient amount of instability that will cause him to reconsider his attempt to take control." Victor gave some thought to the concept. Certainly, it was a dangerous move, but it was also a very astute one. Victor was certain that Tucker would be able to handle the internal disputes, and his involvement provided him with an international advantage that he would not have otherwise had. A hard tone could be heard in Victor's voice as he accepted. "But I beg you, Tucker, to not cross me. This partnership is only going to last for a short time, and I will be following your every action." Tucker wore a sneer. "Victor, I wouldn't expect anything less from you," the speaker said. The first thing that Victor did was to get his family together. Nick, Victoria, and Adam were invited to attend a secret meeting that he had organized to take place at Newman Towers. Due to the fact that they were aware of the anxiety that frequently accompanied family gatherings, their facial expressions were guarded. "Thank you all for coming," Victor began, his eyes moving over his children as he conveyed his gratitude. "Newman Enterprises is currently dealing with a matter that is of the utmost significance. It is my intention to thwart the efforts of a powerful investor who is attempting to win control of the situation." It caused Victoria's eyes to narrow. "To be more specific, how do you intend to go about doing that?" Victor announced, "I've formed a temporary alliance with Tucker McCall, while careful observation of their responses was carried out. In accordance with what was anticipated, every one of them appeared stunned, with a trace of suspicion flashing across their faces. Nick intervened. "Dad, Tucker is not any better than Lang, and he said this. Why would you put your faith in him?" In response, Victor stated, "I do not trust him. However, he possesses the resources that we require. A strategic partnership has been formed. If Lang is successful in gaining control, he will thoroughly dismantle this business and leave us with nothing." With a calculating expression in his eye, Adam gave a slight nod. "All right, I see what you can see here. Now, what exactly do you require from us?" The expression on Victor's face became more resolve as he gazed at each of them. "I require unity," she said. "We just cannot afford to engage in any kind of internal conflict. Any vulnerabilities will be exploited by Lang. Our front is unified, there are no leaks, and there is no dissension." The expression on Victoria's face was one of skepticism as she folded her arms. "It's acceptable, but keep in mind, Dad, that this isn't just your kingdom. We also have a stake in this area. We are going to continue to support you, but if you are going to put our future in the hands of Tucker, we have the right to question every move that you make." When Victor looked at her, he felt a sense of mutual comprehension between them. In a reasonable manner, Victoria, "Even though we are all in this together, I anticipate that you will all get in line. What is at stake here is the continued existence of Newman Enterprises. Everything else is irrelevant." With the unwavering backing of his family, Victor concentrated his efforts on acquiring intelligence regarding Lang's operations. While this was going on, Tucker utilized his foreign connections to create roadblocks for Lang to move through. As a result of a few strategically made calls, Lang's attempts to buy Newman shares were delayed, which provided Victor with the opportunity to bolster his defenses. The advances that Lang made, on the other hand, were unrelenting, and Victor quickly found himself on the defensive. The media spread rumors that Lang was attempting to take over Newman in an antagonistic manner, which led to speculation about Newman's emotional health. Although investors became more suspicious and stock prices fluctuated, Victor did not waver in his determination. The fact that Tucker reached out to Victor with information about one of Lang's major allies, a minor shareholder within Newman Enterprises, who had been surreptitiously acquiring shares in the hope of turning a profit from a sale to Lang, came as a surprise to Victor. A buyout was the solution that Tucker proposed, which would ensure the safety of the shares and prevent them from falling into Lang's possession. Victor praised Tucker's astute reasoning, which was an uncommon instance of appreciation on his portion. When Victor made his statement, he was only half joking when he said, "You might actually be worth your weight, Tucker." With a sneer on his face, Tucker responded, "Don't get used to it. According to Newman, this is not a friendship. It's nothing personal. Following the successful completion of the buyout and the consolidation of the alliance, Victor experienced a revitalized sense of control over his empire. Lang's power started to decrease as a result of the odd collaboration between Victor Newman and Tucker McCall, which was only on a temporary basis. This alliance prevented Lang from breaking into Newman Enterprises. Victor and Tucker were able to successfully drive Lang out of the business scene in Geno City after going through several weeks of smart maneuvering. It was Victor who had been successful in protecting his business, his family, and his legacy, while Tucker had been successful in protecting his own interests. Victor extended his hand to them as they were finishing up their last meeting, a quiet acknowledgement of the unexpected bond that they had formed. The only thing that Victor said was, "Thank you, Tucker. Be that as it may, do not believe that this alters anything between us. We are still competitors." Tucker let out a chuckle while assertively shaking Victor's hand. "Without a doubt, Victor, I wouldn't have it any other way." As the two of them went their own ways, Victor experienced a sense of contentment and relief. Even though it had been unanticipated and unsettling, the collaboration had been successful. Unaffected by Lang's aspirations, his family remained steadfast, and Newman Enterprises continued to provide a secure environment. He was reminded of the strength of unity, even among adversaries, as a result of the entire event. Each and every relationship that Victor Newman formed was only ephemeral, and each win served as a demonstration of his